Alrighty, so we are in Second Samuel, lesson 6, and we have that whole thing in chapter 20. We finished off that lesson 5, and we have that whole thing in 20 where, okay, David, he gets, well, we had Sheba, the son of Beatri, will do us more harm than Absalom. So we had like this whole other um, uprising. So we have the men of Israel followed Sheba, but the men of Judah remained steadfast to their king. And then we found out about what happened with the 10 concubines. And then we had this whole thing with David had put Amasa over his army, but Joab took that back. So then we have whoever favors Joab and whoever is for David, let him follow Joab. So Joab had murdered Amasa, and then led the army. Um, and then we have the wise woman who went and talked to Joab, about, hey, are you really gonna overthrow this whole city? Um, and he said, only hand him over, and I will depart from the city. And so she got it done. So you know, Sheba's taken care of. His head got thrown over the wall. Joab's happy. He leaves, and the end of this is now Joab was over the whole army of Israel. So that little uprising was quashed. So we going into chapter 1, David's back. He's back in Jerusalem. Joab's over the army. All that stuff with Absalom is done, but we still see that the sword has not departed from David, because we have some other things now in chapter 21. So verses 1 through 6. Now there was a famine in the days of David for 3 years, year after year, and David sought the presence of the Lord. And the Lord said, it is for Saul and his bloody house, because he put the Gibeonites to death. So the king called the Gibeonites and spoke to them now. The Gibeonites were not of the sons of Israel, but of the remnant of the Amorites. And the sons of Israel made a covenant with him, but Saul had sought to kill them in his zeal for the sons of Israel and Judah. Thus David said to the Gibeonites, what should I do for you? And how can I make atonement that you may bless the inheritance of the Lord? Then the Gibeonites said to him, we have no concern of silver or gold with Saul or his house, nor is it for us to put any man to death in Israel. And he said, I will do for you whatever you say. So they said to the king, the man who consumed us and who planned to exterminate us from remaining within any border of Israel, let 7 men from his sons be given to us, and we will hang them before the Lord in Gibeah of Saul, the chosen of the Lord. And the king said, I will give them. Insights.
Well, the covenant is a very strong thing, something God takes seriously, and obviously David did too.
Yes.
Um, and if you go back and read Joshua,
Mm-hmm.
it's like even though the Gibeonites tricked him into making a covenant, it still needed to be honored.
Yes.
So, and then Saul didn't honor it because, I mean, you look at it one year and say, well, God told Joshua to annihilate all these people in Canaan. The Gibeonites were in Canaan, they didn't annihilate them.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, he got tricked into making a covenant with them.
Mm-hmm.
So now he can't kill them, and Saul shouldn't have killed them.
No.
So this is justice.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and David, he's got to do the right thing.
Yep. Totally. Yeah, so I mean, this is a whole long passage, so we're not going to read it, but definitely, I mean, they came out, they made themselves look, like they had been traveling for like days on end. They had like old crusty dried out bread and all kinds of stuff. They made the appearance of things and said that they were travelers and things like that. They weren't. They were in the land that Joshua was supposed to conquer, and so they did this. They tricked him. He made the covenant, and then all these kings came out against Gibeah, and that was a whole thing. And God intervened on their behalf, and so because they were in covenant with Joshua, with Israel now. And you're right. I mean, God takes covenant very seriously. Even though they were tricked into the covenant, they should have done their due diligence. And in JD's sermon notes, he pointed out like what happened with Isaac whenever he was tricked by Jacob. As far as just not doing his due diligence. It's like he heard Jacob's voice, but what he felt or whatever was Esau. And so he didn't really do his due diligence, and he was tricked. I mean, even though Jacob I have loved, Esau I have hated, because Jacob, he wanted these things, even though he didn't go about it the right way. He wanted the birthright. He wanted the blessing. But it harkened kind of back to that of just not doing due diligence. And then also Leah. So Laban tricked Jacob and gave him Leah instead of Rachel. And I mean, he was in covenant. He was in covenant with Leah, and then he says, "I'll work another 7 years for Rachel." So he had both of the sisters, but God honored Leah. She was the first covenant wife, and he saw that she was unloved, and he gave her 4 sons right off the bat, and it was through her fourth son, Judah, through which Messiah came. What's his name? Reuben went up. He slept with the concubine, and so he was out. Simeon and Levi used the sign of the covenant, circumcision, against their enemies for raping Dinah, and so it went to the fourth son, and that's how God honored Leah in her covenant with Jacob. He takes covenant very seriously, even though Jacob was tricked into that covenant by Laban. So yeah, I mean, this is righteous. The other thing is David recognized this. So we have King David's back. The David, this is like a high now. Because we've had this horrible low, so to speak, after the whole thing with Bathsheba and the consequences of that and what was going to happen with Absalom. Even though it was a high with David spiritually, with him accepting those consequences and really walking with the Lord through them, and relying on the Lord, and the Lord will do what is good and right, and I'm just going to accept what he does. In this instance, with this 3-year famine, he was like, he recognized, okay, something's up. And then we see that this is a national judgment. It doesn't have anything to do with David. Like, he recognized something's up. He inquired of the Lord. He was like, what is this about? And God tells him. And so this is national judgment versus personal judgment. So we have a contrast here, whereas David just got through personal judgment. And we see that the sword's still not departed from this house, because there's some things that happen later in this chapter. But Um, yeah, the contrast. This is a national judgment for something the previous guy did. So that's a lesson to us this day. A nation can be under judgment for what the previous guy did too. So, um, just just something to think about. Um, and David's just so in tune. I mean, yeah, it does take him 3 years, but a famine. But a lot of times we grow, well, it's just something that happens because we kind of need to be in tune and know the difference. Sometimes things just happen because we live in a fallen world. Sometimes we're being sifted. Satan's asked to sift us. And then sometimes God's trying to get our attention. And we kind of need to be in tune and always, really always talking to God to figure it out. And by year 3, David was like, okay, something's really up. And he inquires of the Lord. So we're on a high with David now. Um, we're at a high point. So I just have the famine for Saul in his bloody house. Any other insight before we move on?
Well, sometimes I think we find it hard to honor promises or oaths of, a generation down the line. I mean, this was like 400 years,
Yeah.
and God still expected that it would be honored.
Mm-hmm.
And, and David found a way to keep his covenant with Mephibosheth
Yeah.
while still keep, honoring the covenant with the Gibeonites. Um,
Yeah.
and then the other thing is I looked at the three. 3 is complete, but I'm not sure that's it. I mean, it's almost like God was waiting on David, not David waiting on God.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so you just, I mean, if David had acted sooner, maybe famine would have ended sooner
Yeah.
because the covenant would have been honored.
Yep. Yep. Definitely. Like I said, it took him 3 years, but he eventually was like, "Okay, yeah, something's up."
Yeah.
And yeah. So, I mean, we kind of see this though. I mean, David's had periods of where he hasn't inquired of the Lord. He's just kind of, and and I think that's why this whole thing with David being a man after God's own heart and this kind of raw um account of his walk, I think it's really encouraging to us because I think that we can say, yeah, we've definitely had those seasons where it's like, yeah, we're a believer, we're saved, but we're not inquiring of the Lord. We're just kind of there, or going our own way, or whatever. And but the main thing is that First John 1:9. Um, if we confess, he is faithful. And I think that's what we see with David here. Whereas Saul never confessed. Anytime he was confronted, it was like, oh, excuse, excuse. Um, and we're going to see that in David's song here in 22. It's like, well, how can David say these things? It's like, well, by the blood of Christ, he can say these things. So we'll get more into that. Um, Covenant is very serious. Like you said, it's been 400 years since that covenant. God is very serious about covenant.
He's
Um,
pretty patient too.
yeah.
I mean, it's like 400 years.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Part of that is probably that's how long it took to get someone to have David's heart so that he would say, is there a reason for this happening?
Uh-huh.
You know, maybe
Yeah.
there was nobody before that.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, and what's crazy is whenever, Joshua made covenant with the Gibeonites, God ends up it's like, well, you're in covenant with Israel, so now I'm on your side. It's like, I mean, he honored that. I mean, it's kind of just really amazing, and yours God is so patient and so kind. Um, oh my gosh, I mean, I'm definitely a prime example of how patient he is. Um, um, so yeah, I mean, this is just this, and I love this. What's coming up in here with David, how God works, because you see like this national judgment, but then God's going to remind David through Rizpah's actions of, oh, there's something I need to take care of. So yeah. Um, 7 through 9. But the king spared Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, because of the oath of the Lord which was between them, between David and Saul's son Jonathan. So the king took 2 sons of Rizpah, the daughter of Ai, Armani, and Mephibosheth, whom she had borne to Saul, and the 5 sons of Merab, the daughter of Saul, whom she had borne to Adriel, the son of Barzillai, the Maholathite. Um, then he gave them into the hands of the Gibeonites, and they hanged them in the mountain before the Lord, so that the 7 of them fell together, and they were put to death in the first days of harvest, at the beginning of barley harvest. Um, Insights.
Well, I'm not really sure who Merab is, but maybe the older daughter of Saul that was originally
Yes.
promised to
Mm-hmm.
David. Um, but like I said before, he didn't have to do, he'd made that covenant with Jonathan, so he didn't send Mephibosheth. He sent the other ones.
Mm-hmm.
It had to be pretty hard, but yet,
Yeah.
you know, Rizpah, I think she was the concubine, right? Yeah, it says
Yeah.
it later, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, so she was a concubine of Saul's, and she had 2 sons. Obviously, one was Mephibosheth. I was like, oh my gosh, these names. And then I went and I looked up this Barzillai, and it wasn't the same as from the chapter before. It was a different guy. Um, because I was like, I got to figure all these people out. But yeah, so he was able to honor his covenant with Jonathan, um, with his son Mephibosheth. He kept him alive, but he took the 2 sons of Rizpah, the concubine, and then the 5 sons of Merab. And so, yes, Merab was originally promised to him by Saul, but then Saul like married her off to somebody else. But then he did marry off Michal to David, basically as a political weapon. He saw his daughter love David, and so yeah, that's what he. And then he married her off to somebody else after David fled. But that's a whole thing. Um, but yeah, I mean, she asked you to go back into chapter 9, and there's also the passages in First Samuel about the Jonathan and David's covenant. So he was able to protect Mephibosheth, and then he came up with 7 between Rizpah and Merib. And yeah, this is I don't know. He had to me, since Merib was married before he and Michal, and he had to have been around. I don't know, but this was probably hard. It could have gotten a little political. I don't know. But I just have two sons of Ritzpah and five sons of Merib hanged. Um, she also had brought you to Numbers 35, 34, about the only way that you can, so you shall not pollute the land in which you are, for blood pollutes the land, and no expiation can be made for the land for the blood that is shed on it, except by the blood of him who shed it. Um, and then you shall not defile the land in which you live in the midst of which I dwell, for I, the Lord, am dwelling in the midst of the sons of Israel. So, yeah. And then the whole other thing is if you break covenant, then that the other party has the right to uh, kill you, basically. So it's a whole thing. So this is totally right. It's right culturally and it's right biblically. Um, Even though that's kind of a hard thing to um, think about, because you're like, well, what did these people do? But there you go. So 10 through 14. And Rizpah, the daughter of Ai, took sackcloth and spread it for herself on the rock from the beginning of harvest until it rained on them from the sky. And she allowed neither the birds of the sky to rest on them by day, nor the beasts of the field by night. And when it was told David that Rizpah, the daughter of Ai, the concubine of Saul, had done, then David went and took the bones of Saul and the bones of Jonathan his son from the men of Jabesh Gilead, who had stolen them from the open square of Bethshan, where the Philistines had hanged them on the day the Philistines struck down Saul in Gilboa. He brought up the bones of Saul and the bones of Jonathan his son from there, and they gathered the bones of those who had been hanged. They buried the bones of Saul and Jonathan his son in the country of Benjamin in Zelah, in the grave of Kish his father. Thus they did all that the king commanded, and after that God was moved by prayer for the land. Insight.
Well, I don't know that David took the bones for any other reason than that. I mean, he probably had compassion for the mothers.
Yeah.
Um, and it probably was about time that they retrieved Saul and Jonathan's bones anyway out of Jabesh Gilead. Gilead. I mean, that was good what they did.
Uh
I
huh.
mean, they honored them at the time by doing that, but still. And I think the payment was made, so God was content.
Mm-hmm.
This is God was moved by the prayer for the land. So,
Yep. Yep. Um, the covenant was honored, but also David did right. That you see this kind of remind like, oh, I mean, Saul and Jonathan's bones probably should have been brought back already. Saul was the Lord's anointed. I mean, yeah, he was a problem, and God sent an evil spirit to torture him and stuff like that. But still, he was the Lord's anointed. And it was only after everybody was buried, um, it says, and after that, God was moved by prayer for the land. It was after everybody was buried. And you see that we have the first days of the harvest at the beginning of the barley harvest. Um, from the beginning of the harvest until it rained on them from the sky. And she allowed neither of the birds of the sky to rest on them by day, nor the beasts of the field at night. And when it was told by David, so there was a little bit of time passed in between, and then you see that, okay, now we're going to bury everybody and make this right. And then God was moved for prayer, moved by prayer for the land. So after every single thing was made right, then he was moved. And so this whole like red split thing, um, we see that David, oh, I need I need to finish this up. I need to take care of this. Um, so I think it's kind of neat how this hasn't been like a big thing with God up until now. And if you notice, he'll kind of do that. He'll kind of take care of like, okay, we got the screaming things we need to take care of, and then we have some other things. And sometimes we got the screaming things, and we need to do something to really get your attention. And then sometimes he'll bring things to your attention quietly through other things, that it's like, okay, oh, yeah, I need to do this. Um, so I thought that was kind of a couple of neat things in here as far as national judgment versus personal judgment, and just inquiring of the Lord to recognize like what's going on here, what needs to be done. And so this is, even though this is horrible as far as these people having to be killed and stuff like that, this is a high. And just David, like, oh, okay, there's something I need to do, doing the right thing. Um, and then also the seriousness of covenant, because we look at it as woe, but you have to look at it as God is a covenant keeper, and it's very serious to him about breaking covenant, because the main covenant with him is our salvation. And so he wants those pictures of covenant kept because he will not break covenant. So he doesn't like broken pictures. Like, why doesn't God like divorce? Because marriage is a picture of God the Father and Israel, and God the Son and the bride, the church. So he doesn't like his pictures broken. Now, he's not saying you can't get divorced. I mean, there's obviously circumstances that he allows divorce. Why? Because that person broke the picture. He's like, I'm your covenant partner. I wouldn't treat you like that. I'm not going to cheat on you. I'm not going to beat you. I'm not going to do horrible things to your children. They broke the that's covenant breaking. So they broke the covenant. So yeah, you're released. But that's, whenever it says God hates divorce, that's why. And plus what it does to families and stuff like that. But yeah, that doesn't mean that God's like, yeah, you have to stay in every single situation, especially if they're the ones that broke in covenant. I just have David brought the bones of Saul and Jonathan from Jabesh Gilead, and then gathered to bones of those hanged. Any other insights here? If we move on to 15 through 17. So now when the Philistines were at war again with Israel, David went down and his servant with him, and as they fought against the Philistines, David became weary. Then Ishbi-Benob, who was among the descendants of the giant, the weight of whose spear was 300 shekels of bronze in weight, was girded with a new sword, and he intended to kill David. But Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, helped him and struck the Philistine and killed him. Then the men of David swore to him, saying, you shall not go out again with us to battle, so that you do not extinguish the lamp of Israel. Insight. I did see in commentary, I mean, he's up in years. Commentary was putting him like around his 60s, possibly. Um, again, at war with the Philistines. The Philistines are always their enemies. But then we have this whole we find out later to well, it says he was among the descendants of the giant, and we find out that there's more in this next paragraph. But the giant being Goliath, which could bring up, I mean, that's a whole thing. So basically, we're going to find out there is four sons, but it brings up the subject of giants. So you get into Genesis chapter 5, and some people is it 5? Yeah, 5. Some people translate that that fallen angels had relations with women, and that created the Nephilim. If you're tracking with Genesis, everything was created after its kind. Angels were totally separate. There's no way. Angels, fallen angels or demons can't inhabit people, for sure. The other thing is that's taught with that is that Noah was intact genetically. That's why he was perfect. It's like, no, Noah was just the only righteous man left. So you can identify in scripture, I think it's about 7 quote unquote races or groups of giants. Whenever I studied Genesis with Katie, we identified several different groups, and this is Goliath is obviously one of them from Gath, and he had sons. So if the whole Noah thing was true, why do we still have Nephilim and giants and stuff like that? It's just genetics. It's nothing else. It's not anything like weird. Some people say that, oh, that came from Noah's wife. It's like, well, if God wiped out the whole earth because of that, because of messed up genetics, then why was it still after the flood? Like, there's going to be no loopholes. So that whole thing just does not hold water. And especially if you're tracking with the whole, like, literary flow of Genesis. Key repeated phrase, after its kind, after its kind, after its kind. We get out of chapter 3 into chapter 4. In chapter 3, we're told about a seed. Chapter 4, we're told about who's not the seed. And then we get into who is the seed all the way till Noah. So that's what's tracking through there and nothing else. So that just shakes out that whole theory. But here we have, so David had slew Goliath, and now this is one of his progeny that he's going to kill David. So Goliath's son's going to kill David. So I just have, and then we have David he's old. So I have, you shall not go out again with us to battle, so that you do not extinguish the lamp of Israel. He's just not holding up to battle anymore. So that decision was made. Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, so his nephew, saved him. Any other insights before we move on? So 18 through 22, now it came about after this that there was war again with the Philistines at Gob. Again, the sword shall never depart from your house. Then Sibbecai the Hushathite struck down Saph, who was among the descendants of the giants. There was war with the Philistines again at Gob, and Elhanan, the son of Jer-oregim, the Bethlehemite, killed Goliath the Gittite, and the shaft of whose spear was like a weaver's beam. And there was war at Gath again, where there was a man of great stature who had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, and 24 in number, and he also had been born to the giant. When he defied Israel, Jonathan the son of Shimei, David's brother, struck him down. These four were born to the giant in Gath, and they fell by the hand of David and by the hand of his servants. Insights. So basically, we have more descendants, more war with the Philistines. It seems to me like, especially since it's Goliath's sons, that it's harkening back to that. And yeah, but we have them all struck down. And that kind of leads us into the next chapter, where David has had these enemies, so to speak, all his life. He was anointed by Samuel. He goes to the battle. He's back at home with dad. All the brothers are off at the battlefield with Saul. We have the giant. Dad sends David to go check on his brothers, and he's just like, "What? Why are you guys just sitting around?" He goes and slays the giant, and then that begins his servitude to Saul, basically. And so he's in service to Saul. Saul turns on him, and then he has to flee from Saul. Saul's his enemy. He's fleeing for his life for years on end. And then he's made king, but it was kind of a slow process, as we saw, and there was lots of wars and battles. Abner had put one of Saul's sons on the throne, and that was a whole thing. And so it took several years for David to totally come in, and there was war. There was war over it, and it took several years for David to fully become king of Israel. And then, there's always wars and stuff like that, always skirmishes, and always things with the Philistines throughout history. That's why today you have what is called Palestine. So whenever Rome conquered Israel, as laid out in Daniel chapter 2 and 7, whenever Rome conquered Israel, they named it Palestine. Because what Rome would do was, whenever they conquered a territory, they would name it after the enemies, just to kind of thumb their nose at whoever they conquered. So they named it Palestine. So that's where we get that today, or Palestine, after the Philistines. So that's where we get Palestine today. So it's a slur, really, to call it Palestine. It's a slur that the Romans put on that area. So David becomes king. There's always skirmishes, and then he sins with Bathsheba, and then that just unleashes the whole thing of consequences. Absalom basically revolts against him. You have the whole thing with Amon raping Tamar, and then that led to consequences from inaction of taking care of that with Absalom, and Absalom turns on him and takes the kingship, and wants to kill him, and all this kind of stuff, and then that's done. But there was civil war again to put him back on the throne, and then there's and now that he's back on the throne, there is this thing with, okay, now we have famine, so that's hardship, and we've taken care of that, and now we got the Philistines to deal with again. So going into chapter 22, chapter 21, chapter theme, after that, God was moved by prayer, is what I picked, because most of that was concerning that famine and that covenant. So 1 through 51. I looked, I mean, we could have put some paragraph divisions in here. And I looked at the text and I was kind of like, well, we weren't really given any by her, so I just went with the whole thing. Um, but we can kind of pick it apart and analyze it in parts. So, and David spoke the words of this song to the Lord in the day that the Lord delivered him from the hand of all his enemies and from the hand of Saul. And he said, the Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer. My God, my rock, in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold and my refuge, my Savior, you save me from violence. So I'm going to go with these three right here, insights into this.
Well, David's focus in this section is it's like what God is to him and how he sees him. So it's my rock, my fortress, my deliverer, my God. Um,
Yes. Yes. Yeah, and it says delivered him from the hand of all his enemies. And so that was, we just kind of listed all of that, and from the hand of Saul. Um, and you can really kind of put that whole like Gibeonite thing in, because the famine was brought about because of Saul breaking covenant with the Gibeonites, and that whole thing needed to be taken care of. But I mean, he also rescued him from Saul back then, from Saul's, from Abner trying to put Saul's son on the throne, and also just there's no real descendants from Saul left, from what we can tell, that are gonna be a problem to David and his descendants. Mephibosheth certainly isn't gonna be a problem. But yes, what God is to David, and He is all these things. So I call upon the Lord, who is worthy to be praised, and I am saved from my enemies. For the waves of death encompassed me, the torrents of destruction overwhelmed me, the cords of Sheol surrounded me, the snares of death confronted me. So, insights into 4 through 6.
well, this one seems to focus on David's cry to God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, yes. So he called upon the Lord, who is worthy to be praised, and I am saved from my enemies. So it's a who God is to David, who God is. He is, um, he's who we take refuge in. He's our shield. He's the horn of our salvation. He's our stronghold. He's our refuge. He's our Savior. He saves us from violence. He's worthy to be praised. We're saved from our enemies. There's times where the waves of death encompass us. Um, you know, and though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, Psalm 23. Um, and we do get overwhelmed by torrents of destruction, and we're encompassed by waves of death, and the cords of Sheol. Sheol's still around, so I'm surprised she didn't bring up like what's Sheol, because that's something we need to understand. So, Sheol slash Hades. Hades is the Greek word for Sheol. It's in the Old Testament, in Luke 16 kind of deals this out. There were two compartments. One compartment I call it the cool side. The other one I call the hot side. So the cool side was called paradise, or Abraham's bosom, and that's where all believers, all righteous, went before Christ died on the cross. They went to Abraham's bosom or to paradise. And there was a chasm in between that and what we call the hot side. And that's where all the unrighteous or non believers went. That's where their souls went and still go to this day whenever they die. So, in that time, whenever David died and he went to Sheol, he went into Abraham's bosom because he was a righteous man. Now, somebody like Doeg, who we would consider unrighteous, went to the hot side. So today, Sheol is empty. After Christ died and put the blood of propitiation on the altar, in the throne room in heaven, which is the temple and the tabernacle are a picture of that. And he led the captives free. He led everybody from Sheol on the cool side and Abraham's bosom in paradise up to heaven. So now they are present with the Father since that propitiation has been made. So that side is empty. The other side is still filling up, and it will be dealt with after the millennial reign. So I'm surprised she didn't bring that subject up and kind of like be like, what is this place and what is David talking about? So that's what he's talking about. He's talking about the Sheol, this place that people go after death, either one side or the other. It was surrounding him, and the snares of death were confronting him. So I just put Saul and Absalom over here because those were the big ones that were trying to kill him. So then in my distress I called upon the Lord, and yes, I cried to my God, and from his temple he heard my voice, and my cry for help came into his ears. And then the earth shook and quaked. The foundations of heaven were trembling and were shaken, because he was angry, and smoke went up out of his nostrils, fire from his mouth devoured, and coals were kindled by it. He bowed the heavens also, and he came down with thick darkness under his feet, and he rode on a cherub and flew, and he appeared on wings of the wind, and he made darkness canopies around him, a mass of waters, thick clouds of the sky. From brightness before him coals of fire were kindled. The Lord thundered from heaven, and the Most High uttered his voice, and he sent out arrows and scattered them, lightning and routed them. And the channels of the sea appeared, and the foundations of the world were laid bare by the rebuke of the Lord at the blast of his breath of his nostrils. And he sent from high, and he took me, and he drew me out of many waters, and he delivered me from my strong enemy, from those who hated me, for they were too strong for me. They confronted me in the day of my calamity, but the Lord was my support. He also brought me forth into a broad place, and he rescued me because he delighted in me. Okay, I'm going to stop right there because we have a couple of subjects to go over. And he delighted in me is where I stopped. Okay, so insight into 17 through 20.
God hears David and then rescues him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's awesome. I mean, it's like, woof. And so, you can read this and be like, okay, and Get this picture in your mind. Take this, clip it out, put it down somewhere, because whenever you call on the Lord, because He is delighted in you, because you are His child, when you call on Him, this is what happens. So just like clip this out, put it somewhere, and be reminded of this. I mean, usually we go to the Psalms, and there's a lot of good things in the Psalms. I didn't even know this was in 2 Samuel, and I've read this before. So obviously I forgot, but I was like, oh, this is cool. This is what happens. So you can just get that picture in your mind whenever you call on Him. Um, so, um, and He rode on a cherub in Ezekiel. We saw the cherubim, and like I was like, oh, and in Revelation we'll see that in the throne room. Just in JD's notes, it kind of summed it up. I like how one commentator said it. What is most impressive is a magnificent way the psalmist describes God rising from His throne in heaven in response to His servant's cry, parting the clouds and descending to fight the king's battles, accompanied by earthquakes, thunder, storms, and lightning. And then another commentator had this to say: when God came, He spoke up on David's behalf, commanding all creation to respond to His passionate desire to deliver His child. Any other insights before we move on?
There really isn't anything God won't do for us, is there?
No. 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 And He will, like, He gave David consequences. I mean, there's earthly consequences, and then there's also consequences for our own good. But He also rescued him out of that too, and judged Absalom for it. And He did the same thing, like, so this whole like national judgment thing with this, broken covenant that needed to be taken care of. Um, I started thinking about with the whole captivities, and Daniel and Ezekiel and Jeremiah, they were individuals that went through this national judgment. But even with that national judgment that God put on them because they were doing really bad things, not Daniel and Jeremiah and Ezekiel, but the people around them, their leaders and things like that, He still turned around and judged the people that He used to judge them, because He's like, you went too far, and you're a pagan nation too. And we see how He humbled Nebuchadnezzar. It's like He just has these ways of just like taking care of everything, and even in our own judgment He will take care of us. And if we just call on Him, if and recognize, I mean, how many times did Israel, He put judgment on them, He sent a famine, He sent a plague, or He did this or He did that, and they just called upon the name of the Lord and rescued them out of it. I mean, it's amazing. Who else does that? Nobody else. So yeah, there's nothing He won't do for us. I mean, except help us sin, or something like that. I mean, but there's just nothing He won't do for us. And this next part I think is really cool. So the Lord has rewarded me according to my righteousness. According to the cleanness of my hands, He has recompensed me. For I have kept the ways of the Lord, and have not acted wickedly against my God, for all His ordinances were before me. And as for His statutes, I did not depart from them. And I was also blameless towards Him, and I kept myself from my iniquity. And therefore the Lord has recompensed me according to my righteousness, according to my cleanness before His eyes. With the kind you show yourself kind, and with the blameless you show yourself blameless, and with the pure you show yourself pure, and with the perverted you show yourself astute. All right, insights.
section seems to deal with forgiveness,
Mm-hmm.
um, and God's reward according to David's righteousness.
Yep. Yeah, so there were like some that would say that this was written before his sin with Bathsheba, but you no, because this is at the end. This is after all this, and this was placed in Second Samuel because it was written at the end because it was written at the end. So this is definitely it. It he's blameless, and why is he blameless? Because of his heart towards God. He confesses a sin when he's confronted with it by God. I mean, he sent Nathan, a type of the Holy Spirit, but when it's like, okay, yeah, then he just confesses it. And we see all the Psalms, cleanse me with hyssop, and that's his attitude towards God. And his reliance on Messiah. That's what all of your righteous in the Old Testament, it was their heart towards God, their confession of I'm a sinner and I am in need of a savior, and my eyes are focused on Messiah. Job, the most ancient text of the Bible, an ancient account. I know my Redeemer lives. So whenever those three guys are just like, yeah, you got to have some type of sin, he's like, no, look, I know my Redeemer lives. It's not that Job was a perfect man, as he knew his Redeemer lived and that all sin was confessed. You saw him doing all those sacrifices, it was because he was following the law. He knew that that was a picture of what was to come. I know my Redeemer lives. So this is David here. And we're going to see he's going to talk about Davidic covenant here in a minute. And what's the Davidic covenant? That somebody will always be on, from your line, will always be on the throne. David, Messiah is going to come from your line, and he's always going to be on the throne. That was Davidic covenant. So that's what David, and I mean, 1 John 1:9, we're sinners. It wasn't that if we say we don't have sin, there's a problem. But if we confess, so what was Saul's problem? Anytime he was confronted, it was just like, But David, it's a whole different story. So you're like, well, wait a second, David, that the statute he was keeping is I'm a sinner. I'm going to confess my sin to God, and he's going to cleanse me. How is he going to cleanse me? And how am I righteous? Through Messiah. And then the other cool thing in here is I think this commentary really kind of sums it up. Where it says, I suppose it's possible to say this may have been written prior, but if it were, it would place David in a position of self-righteousness. I would suggest that upon closer examination, you'll see a distinction that's made here in that he's dealing with the enemy. Let me explain. Before God, I am a wretched sinner, whereas before the enemy, conversely, I'm a righteous and blameless saint. So Charles Spurgeon said before God, the man after God's own heart was a humble sinner, but before his slanderers, he could with unblushing face speak the cleanness of his hands and the righteousness of his life. So this also summed it up, because whenever we confess our sin and we're right with God with it, anything beyond that is slander, either from the enemy, which there is no condemnation in Christ Jesus. So after you've confessed something and it's dealt with God, if the enemy comes after you with something, either through a thought or through the mouth of somebody else, oh, you can call upon the Lord and he will deal with it. And so once you confess with something and it's right and it's dealt with, it's done. So there is a, this is just packed with a lot here. Psalm 23 says that he prepareth a table before our enemies. And so you see through David's life of um, the bitterness from Bathsheba's grandfather and from Absalom and things like that. But before God, he's blameless. Like, yeah, people had things against him, but before God, he's blameless. And God took care of those people that were slandering David, because before God, he's blameless. He took care of that. He confessed that sin with Bathsheba. That's taken care of. The child didn't live. There was an earthly consequence for that. But he blessed them with another child who he made king. So there was a total reversal. So God's economy is not man's economy. I think that God does a better job with things than we do. Um, any insight into 21 through 27 before? This here is just a little aside. I was like, what is this? I wanted to know, and it became a whole thing. And it was a lesson in just different translations. This word actually means twisted, wrestle, or torturous. And I was like, ooh. Um, I didn't see astute anywhere. I understand why they use that. I think the ESV actually translated it better. Um, so the New King James Version translated it as shrewd. The KJV translated it as unsavory, but the ESV I think really did a good job. And it said, "With the purified you deal purely, and with the crooked you make yourself seem torturous." That harkens back to Saul. So, just looking at the literary flow, what David's saying, and what's happened, and if you know your doctrines. So David confessed his sin, and everything is at peace with him and God, and God is, you see, like, yeah, there's some earthly consequences and some things going on, but with Saul didn't confess. He was just and God sent that evil spirit to torture him. So I was like, they did a really good job of picking that one out. So that was just precept wise, inductive study. You do word studies, you look at literary flow, you can look at how different translations translated it and things like that. But moving on, and you save an afflicted people, but your eyes are on the haughty whom you abase. For you are my lamp, O Lord, and the Lord illumines my darkness. For by you I can run upon a troop. By my God I can leap over a wall. As for God, his way is blameless. The word of the Lord is tested, and he is a shield to all who take refuge in him. For who is God beside the Lord, and who is a rock besides our God? God is my strong fortress, and he sets the blameless in his way. And he makes my feet like hinds' feet, and he sets me on my high places. He trains my hands for battle, so that my arms can bend a bow of bronze. You have also given me the shield of your salvation, and your help makes me great. You enlarged my steps under me, and my feet have not slipped. I pursued my enemies and destroyed them, and I did not turn back until they were consumed. And I have devoured them and shattered them, so that they did not rise, and they fell under my feet. For you have girded me with strength for battle. You have subdued under me those who rose up against me. You have also made my enemies turn their backs to me, and I destroyed those who hated me. They looked, but there was none to save me, or there was none to save, even to the Lord, but he did not answer them. Then I pulverized them as the dust of the earth, and I crushed and stamped them as the mire of the streets. You have also delivered me from the contentions of my people, and you have kept me as head of the nations. A people whom I have not known serve me. Foreigners pretend obedience to me. As soon as they hear, they obey me. Foreigners lose heart and come trembling out of their fortresses. The Lord lives, and blessed be my rock, and exalted be the God, the rock of my salvation. The God who executes vengeance for me and brings down peoples under me, who also brings me out from my enemies. You even lift me from those who rise up against me. You rescue me from the violent man. All right, insights. This is kind of a long one, but there's kind of a key repeated word.
Well, to me, this section is kind of all about, that verse 28, where God is our lamp. God's the one that lights our way. Um, and then in 34, when it says he makes our feet like hinds feet, the interesting thing about that type of sheep, they climb these rocks and cliffs kind of thing, and their back feet track exactly where their front feet were. So their front feet are planted, they sort of jump up, the back feet go exactly where the front feet were, and the front feet find a new spot. And it's used several times about us kind of tracking along with the word or following God, doing what God's word says or doing God's will. So that's it's kind of a interesting verse, I think. Repeated words, I didn't really look at that. I mean, oh, like I did through this whole section, I circled I statements with one color, my with another, and God as you, like you have also made my enemies, you have also delivered, those type of statements. So in this one, I've got I's and my's, but I guess um, I guess that's about all I had on that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you hit it. It it's you. It's not like you did this for me. I can do this because of you. It wasn't like, oh, I do this. It's you see the humility of David towards God. It's God that does it. It's because of him I can do this. Like everything I have, everything I can do, everything I do is because of him. Like you nailed it. So, yeah, that was the big one, and it's because of him. And I really like. I mean, I can totally picture what you're saying about the because we have ibex, and it's actually just really amazing to think like we're just like how can you do that even from firstborn, how they can just go up these like sheer drops, but I mean, I just got this picture of, the Lord being our lamp, His word being a lamp unto our feet. Um, you know, you follow forward, and just if you plant your front feet, if you're a little sheep, plant front feet, and then the rest will follow. And if you're planting your front feet in the Lord, the rest will follow. He's a light unto my path. So yeah. And even when we mess up, there's that picture here with David's life. You confess, and that's where you're planting your front feet. He's a light. When there's darkness, He's a light. He's a light unto my path. My path just went dark. Why? Well, because I did something I shouldn't do. But God's the light. He's like, hey, I'm still here. He's the light. Just yeah, I mean, just by His precepts. Well, what are His precepts? Well, yeah, there's the ones laid out of don't sin, but when we do, what do? Well, we confess it, and then we're good. Um, so I mean, there's just a lot in here with the I is not necessarily there is no I in team, and it's about David. It's really about God. everything that he is and has done and has is because of God. Um, so anything else before we close this out with the therefore? What is the therefore, therefore? So therefore, I will give thanks to you, O Lord, among the nations, and I will sing praises to your name. He is a tower of deliverance to his king, and shows loving kindness to his anointed, to David and his descendants forever. So, insights.
Well, that takes us back to 2 Samuel 7,
Mm-hmm.
about, his descendants being on the throne forever.
Yeah.
And then David just giving thanks and praise to God.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so like what's therefore? Therefore, well, because of all the things above that he listed above that, which is like a whole long list. But because of all those things, I give thanks to you, O Lord, among the nations, and I will sing praises to your name. And then that loving kindness, that's a covenant word. So the fact that he put that in there to his anointed, like he knows that God anointed him, but so there's a difference. God anointed David through Samuel, and I mean he also anointed Saul, but David's humble about it. And he was humble about Saul being anointed. He's like, hey, he's the Lord's anointed. I'm not going to kill him. I'm not going to touch him. I'm not going to lay a hand on him. And why are you happy that you did? I mean, he's very humble about this and humble towards God. Um, and then, yes, we're at Davidic covenant, 2 Samuel 7, to David and his descendants forever. And forever means forever, not just like for the next 10 years. I mean, it's forever. And so he knows that's Messiah. His dominion is forever. Um, so, any other insights before we close this out? I just have David spoke the words of this song.
No, it's a good one to,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think it's a good one to give yourself some fodder for praising God for sure. It's a lot of stuff in there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was like, oh, we have this psalm in Second Samuel. I mean, I was like, oh, okay. And yeah, I mean, this is cool. I think this is definitely one to clip and put in your back pocket. And I think it's encouraging because it encompasses so much of just looking at David's life. When you look at Genesis, who is God and who is man, and just the ups and downs of their walk, and then the ups and downs of David's walk, and well, I think we can compare it with our lives and the ups and downs, and what makes a man after God's own heart is not necessarily whether or not how much you sin or don't sin. It's if you confess that sin. If we say we don't have sin, then we're liars. David wasn't a liar. um and so we see the difference in Saul and David. That's the contrast in these two books. And I think it gives us hope, especially whenever we are confronted with our sin. And I think it gives us hope with the enemy who likes to come in and condemn us even after we've confessed it. I think it gives us hope with our earthly enemies who act as the mouthpiece of Satan, to bring up that sin after we're right with God with it. And we're right with God because of the blood of Christ. So I also think we see this picture of not self-righteousness, but righteousness through God. So this is power packed in here. And I think it's definitely one to clip. Maybe I would take this one, print it out on a piece of paper, and then go stick it in the Psalms, because the Psalms is always where we go when we're in distress. So I'd take this one, stick it in there. But next time, for next lesson, we'll finish this out with 23 and 24.